Hoi! In Deadlock, you need to learn a lot of things at once, and I'm here to help. I already started giving you some tips the other day, but here are some more that I wish I knew when I started that will hopefully help you suck a little bit less as a beginner. Let's start with a mobility option. If you've watched my previous video or you've played the game a little bit, you're probably familiar with all the normal dodges and jumps and dashes and jump dashes and whatnot. But did you know that there's also a down dash? If you find yourself in the air but you quickly want to get down to the ground, then you can double tap your crouch button, by default that would be Control, in order to descend much more quickly. However, this will cost you 1 stamina in return. There are definitely situations where you want to prioritize this over using a jump, especially if you can get out of line of sight, but it's a bit more difficult to use than just dodging away from the enemy. Leveling abilities in Deadlock can be a little bit confusing as a beginner. Here you can see the level chart for Lash that kind of explains how you actually level up in the game. As you can see, at 0 you get your first ability unlock. At 400 Spirit you get your second ability unlock, and along with that you also get AP, an ability point. Unlike in other MOBAs like League of Legends or Smite, these are completely separate things. So you don't need to make a choice between leveling up one ability or unlocking the other, but you can do both at the same time, because one uses an ability unlock point and the other uses an ability point. The unlock curve is also different from other games. While you get your second ability at 400 Spirit, your third ability doesn't unlock until 1500 Spirit. In the meantime, you get 2 ability points as well as a power increase, which gives you an increase to your bullet damage, melee damage and base health. For some heroes like Bebop or Seven, other additional attributes also get increased with these power increases. Your ultimate unlocks at 3000 souls, and after that you get power increases up until 15,000 souls, after which you only get ability unlocks, which actually continue further than the 18k you can see here. They just keep on going until you don't have anything to upgrade anymore. Since we're already on the topic of leveling and souls, let's talk about last hitting a little bit. Deadlock has last hit and deny mechanics, which actually extend far beyond just the laning itself. But let's start with the laning part. In early game, when you kill an enemy minion, it gives you some souls. Then a green orb will float out of them. This orb also provides you with souls if it makes it high enough into the air. After a while it will pop and it will provide you with the souls. However, you can also shoot this orb to claim the souls immediately. And this is something you should generally do unless there are absolutely no enemies nearby, because otherwise what can happen is that the enemy decides to deny you this orb by shooting it themselves. And you can obviously also do that to them. If they kill one of your minions, you'll see a red orb floating up. This means that this is an orb that is open for denying. If you deny this orb in early game, you get half of the total soul value from the minion. If you deny it after 10 minutes, you actually get the full value. But these orbs also come into play with other game mechanics. If a player on your team dies, their souls will float up, and it's going to be multiple of them, and you can shoot them to deny the enemy part of the souls. If a structure falls, it will also have souls floating up into the sky. This is especially noticeable on walkers, which provide a massive amount. So if your structure is about to fall, it can be best to cut your losses and create a bit of distance so that you can easily shoot the souls that come up from it afterwards, and therefore deny the enemy some of the advantage they'd otherwise be getting. There's another way to secure souls, which is melee damage. Now you can simply hit the soul orbs that fly up into the air and secure them that way if you are reloading, which is nice. But more importantly, if you kill an enemy minion with a melee attack, their souls will immediately be granted to you instead of floating up into the air. Additionally, there also seems to be some sort of visual indicator for the kill threshold with melee, though I haven't been able to 100% verify that. The health bars of minions start with a deeper red and get brighter as their health gets lower. I cannot 100% verify this because it could be a coincidence, but as far as I can tell, there is a stage where the health bar starts glowing relatively bright, which I think indicates an immediate execute with a melee attack. Maybe it's just that at that point you're always dealing enough melee damage and that's why it's the case, but I think this may be an intended mechanic. Either way, once a minion's health bar has that bright glow, you can always just one-shot them with a melee to secure. If you found this video so far helpful, consider subscribing and maybe leaving a like. It helps my channel a ton when it comes to getting discovered in Deadlock while the game's still fresh, so I would very much appreciate it. Next, there is a mechanic that functions relatively differently from most other MOBAs, maybe with the exception of Dota. The towers in this game, or the guardians rather, are not very safe and they will not help you much when you're getting dove while there are minions pushed on the tower. Playing safe is significantly more difficult than just sitting behind your tower, because you can still get shot at, enemies can still hit you, and the towers don't quickly switch aggro to any player that attacks you. If you get pressured, your best options usually are getting sustain items and sticking close to your healing minion. I talked about that in my previous tips video, but sometimes that just won't help enough and you will see that Guardian fall, which also means you lose access to the closest shop to you, which is very unfortunate. Especially when multiple people are pushing your lane, sometimes you simply don't have a choice on this though. If the enemy team is snowballing, but you don't really know where their damage is coming from, there are two tools that will help you. On one hand, you can press tab. You'll see bars under all the players, and these bars indicate roughly what kind of items they're building into. So if someone has a very yellow bar, they're building into gun damage, if someone has a green bar, they're building into health, and if someone has a purple bar, they're building into spirit damage. So you can gear accordingly and consider if it's more worth getting bullet armor or spirit armor against an enemy team, depending on what damage they have more of. Or sometimes they may have just one snowballing player that you're looking to counter, so you're trying to figure out what kind of damage they are doing. Along with that, you can also use the death recap. The death recap, if you die, will show you what types of damage are hitting you, and it will indicate if this was gun damage or spirit damage, so that can also help you in your decision. There is a further way to counter build, which is not super obvious initially, and that's shields. Some items, even some offensive ones, provide these shields, and they show up next to your health bar as a little yellow or purple bar. You can, for example, get these from buying Combat Barrier against bullets or Enchanter's Barrier against spirit damage. As typical for shields, as long as you're getting hit by the right type of damage, these shields get drained before your health actually gets touched. As long as the shield doesn't end up completely empty, it'll start regenerating again after 20 seconds. If it goes completely empty, then it takes a minute to recover. So these can be a nice addition if you're looking to counterbuild a specific type of damage. Melee damage is something that many new players tend to underestimate or even forget about. Melee damage scales with your gun damage, and especially the heavy attack should not be underestimated in damage. It can also be an effective gap closer to enemies at times, though it kinda stops you in its tracks afterwards, so you can't use the momentum from it all too much. Melees are especially useful when you're reloading and an enemy is very low health and you don't have anything else to secure the kill. If you use the melee charge perk, you can even use a heavy melee attack to reload. The learning curve with the melee attacks is pretty funny because it leads us right into our next point. Initially, people will not melee much, then they figure out that melee is pretty good and they start using more and more melee. And eventually, they run into a person that knows the button to stop them and they will have to be a lot more careful with their melee spam. That button is parry. While parrying briefly prevents you from taking other actions, if an enemy hits you with a melee attack during your parry, they will be stunned and take increased melee damage from your attacks afterwards. You have to time this parry right. So ideally you either use it when an enemy is using a charge up heavy attack and you use the parry during the animation of that, or if you can predict someone using light melee attacks like Abrams, maybe just spamming melee attacks in general, and you know that they're gonna get stunned. If the person charging the heavy attack notices you parrying, they will probably try to quickly turn their camera away in order to avoid hitting you to not get parried. The 10-minute mark of the game is important for various reasons, and you may be aware of some of them, but maybe not all. The mid-boss spawns, which is a contestable objective, we're not going to go into detail about that. But more importantly for us, there is the Spirit Urn or the Soul Urn, which is an urn that needs to be carried from one side of the map to the other. While carrying it, you can't use your gun or abilities. However, you can still use dash and slide and so on, and if you have a mobility ability that increases your movement speed, for example, like Haze's Stealth, you can pick up the Spirit Urn with that and it stays active as long as you activated it beforehand. Securing the urn not only grants your whole team a bunch of souls, but also gives you an extra ability point. At the same time, something else spawns on the map that not as many people are aware of, and those are the buffs on the bridges. Both the bridge on the left and right side of the map have some sort of vent on them, and this vent will have that buff appear at 10 minutes, which can provide you with 4 different types of buffs currently. There is Gun, which apparently gives you a 20% fire rate and 40% extra ammo. Survival, which gives you 400 max HP and 1% max HP regeneration. Casting, which gives you 25 spirit and 20% cooldown reduction. And Movement, which gives you 2 stamina, 50% zipline speed, 30% stamina regeneration, and 3 movement speed. I'm not sure if these values are completely up to date, this is what they were in the patch notes, but either way, extremely strong buffs that you don't want to miss out on. After the 10-minute mark, they spawn every 5 minutes. What you probably also don't want to miss out on are more advanced Deadlock tips, so consider subscribing for that. If you haven't seen the first part of these tips yet, then I will link that right here, as well as my recommendation for beginner heroes. Thanks to my patrons for supporting this video, and thank you for watching. Yggslath, out.